Dr. Otiende Omollo, one of the bills that has been processed is the IBC Amendment Bill 2023. And Otiende Omollo will just take us through some of the areas of concern that they had and some of the amendments that have been there. Then Zain and Professor Adams will complete the process, so they'll take over from there. Zain and Prof. I think, Prof, you come first.
Thank you very much to the leadership of Azimio and all Waheshimiwa, all protocols observed. I think that starting where Governor Nderitu has left is that one of the issues that was canvassed that, as Honorable Kalonzo Musyoka said, was an irreducible minimum was the cost of living. And we all know how that happened in the Bomas talks when the government stonewalled. And then when they were stonewalling, they were saying that it was by February that they would be able to reduce the taxes. February came, and now we are in May, and instead of reducing the taxes are going up. And that's why what Governor Nderitu is saying is so important. As I invite Dr. Otiende, let me just put it in context. That NADCO was a successor to the bipartisan talks, of which Azimio was led by Dr. Otiende, and I can see some members, Honorable Sifuna, the SG of ODM. I can see the deputy, is it the whip or deputy whip? Yeah, the deputy leader, Senator Wambua is here. I saw Honorable Amina Munyazi, who was both a member of the bipartisan and NADCO. And basically, NADCO learned a lot from what the bipartisan team had done. In fact, it became the template which NADCO members, led by Honorable Kalonzo Musyoka and deputized by Honorable Ndai, took from. And just in context, Kenya Kwanza had their issues. And Azimio insisted on their issues. In fact, Azimio compelled Kenya Kwanza to include electoral justice. Initially, they simply wanted the reconstitution of the IBC panel as the only issue. But if you finally look at the bills that you'll be taken through, it covers a wide area on electoral justice issues. They didn't want to hear anything about the fidelity to multipartyism. Among the bills that you will be taken through, the one on political party is there. They didn't want to hear anything on the audit of the elections. In fact, they have taken it to court. You'll see that some of the bills we're talking about has that. And lastly, as Honorable Mazayo has indicated, they didn't even want to implement what was finally agreed on. In fact, if you look at those bastardized bills that were brought to the Senate, they are just bringing back what your leadership in NADCO had removed. They were just bringing them back, which means that all along, they just wanted their own thing. With those few remarks, may I invite Dr. Otiende Omollo to help us go through one of the bills which has already been canvassed upon. Dr. Otiende.
Thank you, Prof. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. All protocols observed. I'll be very brief. I am invited in my capacity as one of the members of the Justice and Legal Affairs Committee of the National Assembly, which sits as a joint committee with the Senate Justice and Legal Affairs Committee. And I think Honorable Senator Catherine Muma is with us there, and I think a few other members. Just to say first that I'm going to talk about very briefly the IBC Amendment Bill, which is the first bill that has so far now gone through the National Assembly. it's before the Senate. And as we talk about it, there are three things that are standing out. One is what the speakers have already spoken about, especially Justice Stewart Mazayo, Senator, in terms of the attempts to change. One of the things that is consequential on the process in which we are, and Senator Wambua knows, and Senator Edwin Sifuna, is one of the reasons the first talks collapsed, was the path to take. In the interest of moving forward, it was chosen to take the path through Parliament. And it comes with the vagaries of Parliament. And those are the vagaries of Parliament. We have started seeing them. That will not be the last. They will keep coming. So we must be alive to that. The second one is, as a consequence, we then must suffer the tragedy of our stolen majority in Parliament. And that stolen majority has reduced us to a situation where our leaders are called leaders of minority when they should actually be leaders of majority. And with that, it then subjects us, even in the joint committee in which we are, to the leadership of Kenya Kwanza, both in chairing and the deputy chairs, unlike in the NADCO talks, where there was what we'd call equality of arms. And the third result of that is that therefore we are outgunned and outnumbered in that committee. We have to keep fighting for everything, including retention of a comma, including making sure that everything that came from the NADCO team is reflected in what we are discussing, instead of focusing on how to pass it. We are reduced, thirdly, to a situation where we are subjected to very interesting interpretations. Right now, I think in the National Assembly and even in the Senate, we were given 45 days. The first tragedy is the leadership then interprets those 45 days as 45 parliamentary days. The consequence is immense. Because in a week, Parliament sits on 3 days. If you interpret as 3 days instead of 7, in a month you only have 12 days. And if you exclude recess, you move basically from 45 days to almost 5 months. And that's where we are headed. The tragedy therefore is that, in my considered opinion, there is liturgy from our counterparts on the other side. There is minimal interest in moving the NADCO report and the bills forward. And those are things we'll have to deal with as we go along. The IBC amendment bill, I think, is the easiest, because it is the only bill in which there appears to be a commonality of interest. And therefore, it is the one that they selected to start with. It was not even subjected to a discussion by the committee. But we were happy to get at least one bill out of the way. I want to tell you that the difficult path lies ahead. And it's going to be very difficult. And we will be coming back to that. In terms of the IBC amendment bill, it is very simple. First of all, for the members of the National Assembly, it's not so much a point of discussion now because we discussed it and passed it. It's now before the Senate. I think it was sent to the Senate last week. So the Senate will be considering it. There's a matrix we developed, which I'll share with Senator Stewart Mazayo, just to understand. There's not much that was changed. We confirmed, and having gotten the draft bills from the technical committee, we went paragraph by paragraph, and we were happy to confirm that at least insofar as the IBC amendment bill is concerned, there was no amendment. It came as it came from the NADCO team. But as is expected with the vagaries of Parliament, the team decided that we must go through public participation. So there were hearings, there were presentations, and some of them, as you know, are usually prearranged. You know. So anyway, but fortunately, there were no substantial amendments. There are only 5 areas which I would point out, and they are not fundamental. They were just to align the bill. The first area is in respect of the term of the secretary, which so far as we speak has been 5 years renewable once, the chief executive and secretary of the IBC. The NADCO team proposed that it be 3 years renewable once. After hearing public participation it was decided that it should be 4 years renewable once. That's the only slight amendment. It is not really consequential, but it was thought it is necessary in terms of experience, and the report covers that. The second area is in terms of review of a general election, what you'd call an audit. And the bill requires that what we were now demanding as standalone should be routine. The IBC should do a review of the general election within 1 year of any election. After some discussions, it was thought 1 year might be too constrained, especially for a proper audit, so it was extended to 18 months. It's not really consequential. The third area is in respect of the panel, the selection panel, which was now expanded from 7 to 9. And it was permitted that the existing members of the selection panel are eligible to be considered in the new panel. But what then the committee realized is that there was no mechanism for enabling the new selection panel to commence its work. So that was included in terms of just proper commencement. Additionally, it was realized that there was no clear mechanism for financing the selection panel. And although there were some proposals to make the presidency finance, in some it was the Public Service Commission, but it was determined that because essentially the panel is fundamentally appointed through the parliamentary parties, therefore it's the Parliamentary Service Commission that should provide the budget. And so that was included. That is in strengthening the provisions, it's not altering. Number 4, the transitional clause. There was a transitional clause to dissolve the current selection panel. I think I spoke to that, but not to now activate the new panel. I spoke to that, especially in terms of the future panels, not just the current. So that was tidied up a bit. And then secondly, it was to provide timelines, because there was no clear timelines for by when should the selection panel provide the names to the president, within what time should the president appoint. So it was determined that we say that the selection panel will forward the names to the president within 14 days, because we are all constrained for time on IBC, and that the president should only have a maximum of 7 days, because there's nothing the president is doing with those names, especially as had been captured by senior counsel and our principal, Kalonzo Musyoka, that it's a negotiation, prior negotiation. So there's no reason that it should stay for that long. The last and the fifth is about the definition of parliamentary parties. It was noted that the selection panel, the parliamentary parties would participate, but there was no definition in the Act. So an provision was inserted to define the parliamentary parties, and all that was done was to lift what in the National Assembly Standing Order 20A that defines parliamentary parties. In the National Assembly, it's defined as a minimum of 5 members. Yeah, 5%, yes, not 5 members, 5%. And that's what was lifted. Now, in the Senate, it is different. But fortunately, that definition that was lifted was limited to the National Assembly. It does not say Parliament. It says the National Assembly. So I think this is one area where the Senate might be well guided to make sure there is no amendment to say Parliament. Let our problems in the National Assembly stay with us in the National Assembly. And then we are still okay with that. That really is the essence of the amendment. Thank you very much. Prof.
Thank you very much, Honorable Otiende Omollo.